All right, recording has started, and this is the August 24th, 2023 Crossplane community meeting. I will right now drop a link into the chat for the Zoom meeting here. So folks have a direct link to the agenda doc if you don't already have it. And with that link there, you can join the agenda doc. Feel free to add yourself as an attendee, and feel free to also add any topics for discussion that anybody wants to bring up today also. All right, so let's jump into recent releases. So the first thing to mention there is that we did do a round of Crossplane runtime releases. We have a new versioning strategy here that Hassan was driving, where essentially we will be like publishing versions of the Crossplane runtime packages and the library essentially to kind of match and go kind of to follow the versions of core Crossplane as well, so that it's very clear and that we have a clear branching and patching strategy as well for the specific versions of Crossplane runtime that are in use by specific versions of core Crossplane. So if you want more details about that, Hassan's proposal for it is in this issue 4060 that's linked in the agenda doc. And then there's also links to each one of the release notes for that as well. Hassan, is there anything else you want to add to that about like the thinking for the versioning strategy there, or did that cover it?
No, I think you already pretty much covered it.
All right, cool. And then there's the other release within the ecosystem at the Crossplane level is that following up from the 1.13 Crossplane release, there is a 1.13.2 release as well for the UXP distribution of Crossplane, which is linked here as well if folks want to read about that. So since we have 1.13 out, we are working on 1.14. We are pretty much 1 month into the quarterly cycle, the 3-month cycle. So we are 1/3 of the way through the milestone for 1.14. We have picked up the pace and we've been delivering some features and some fixes, etc., to the main branch. So let's do a quick review of the roadmap. We're not going to spend too much time on that because we have already gone over it in previous meetings, but let's look at the roadmap real quick. So for 1.14, we are making a big investment in composition functions and maturing those and getting those to beta. We are making another investment as well into observe only and granular management policies to mature those and get those to beta. And then a very frequently requested feature, especially from folks with more complicated setups and needs, is ordered deletion and being able to track usage of resources amongst each other. Hassan will be going into a little walkthrough and demo, I think, as well of that later on in the meeting today. So we'll get to go into some more details on that. And then we're also hoping to promote composition validation to beta as well. So a fair amount of maturing of some of the features we've had in alpha for a bit with composition functions, observe only resources, composition validation, and fairly good adoption of those as well. So that'll be really good to get those to a stable, beta place and ready for production usage, etc. And then a new feature that has been highly demanded for ordering deletion as well. So that's the high level roadmap areas investing in for 1.14. Let's take a quick look as well at this board, see if there's anything that folks want to go into from there. And I am going to be dragging and moving the Zoom windows out to see things here too. We are not going to go over every single thing on the board here, but let's take a look to see if there is anything that we can bring up that's worth taking having a bit of a chat about. Ezgi, perhaps for you, there was this bug here, 4504, that was opened for your Crossplane with a panic. I think you had opened a pull request for that. Is there anything to share on that one, or anything that you're blocked on? Anything with this fix?
It got several reviews about returning an error in case of an empty schema is coming. So I have updated the PR accordingly. It's ready for another round. So it's not blocked right now. It's just waiting for review.
Okay, just to be clear, Ezgi, I think I added that comment. I I wasn't saying this should have an error if the schema is empty. It really was a question. I could be convinced that there are use cases where an empty schema that basically is an XR that has nothing but crossplane machinery is useful. If others feel that way, we don't have to have it return an error.
I think it doesn't make sense to have an empty schema, but what I have done is actually checking for the custom resource validation resource instead of the schema of it. So there is a slight difference between what I am returning an error in that case, because I didn't want to change the behavior we currently have. And our tests will fail if I added another level of validation there. So I did probably the minimum amount of work to prevent the panicking and returning a meaningful error there. So it will be great if you can have another look there.
Sounds good.
Awesome, Ezgi. That sounds good. Thanks for that update. And then I had marked this one as a P1 since it has a crash and a panic. The severity of it there is somewhat impactful. So I was going to raise the issue of, hey, do we want to do a patch release for this? But it seems like then the team has already sort of gone that way of we've got backport labels on here indicating that we do want to backport this and run some patch releases for it as well. Is that correct?
Yeah. That's the plan.
Makes sense to me. All right, cool. All right, thanks for driving that, Ezgi. That's really useful. What else on here that we might want to bring up? Philippe, is there anything that you needed on the validation of like XRD schemas as well, which is a nice addition to the composition validations that we've already been doing?
Yeah, we discussed the approach with Hasan already, but maybe a check on the approach also from Nick would be helpful. I also discussed it with Stefan. The validation for custom resource definitions is internal. It's kind of internal to the API server, so we cannot directly access it. It's actually available, but there are issues with dependencies and stuff, so we cannot import that. So I ended up using a dry run apply, which could be okay. We could think down the line to implement some custom validation on XRDs, reflecting the actual validation on CRDs, but yeah, it's not the best solution ever. Maybe we could improve it down the line, but it's already validating what we need. So maybe some feedback there would be nice.
And Philippe, if there were changes to, like, we didn't do it with the dry run apply anymore, do you anticipate that like the high level experience would change at all? Like in terms of, oh, if people are depending on this feature and they're using it a certain way, and now they have to change the way in which they are using it, or do you expect that would be an under the covers thing, that where the interface or the experience level doesn't change?
Probably, I'd say you wouldn't get. I mean, any invalid XRD would still result in the same in an error. Maybe the way we show the message could be a little bit different. For example, here in the example I put in the comment, I'm saying the generated CRD has a metadata name which is invalid, which is actually because it's due to how we put together a few fields of the original XRD. So we could end up, if we decide to implement validation on the XRD itself instead of just rely on rendering the CRDs and then dry run applying them, we could have some more meaningful messages down the line, but still something invalid will always result in an invalid error.
Got it. Understood. Yeah, and Philippe, there's probably some conversations to have sometime down the line as well that you already bring up here. And like if we wanted to do more validation and linting and do it more upfront as well, like how we unify that, how we all that sort of stuff is we're going to do some thinking about that.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
Is it okay if I
yes
ask a quick question? Was that tried with the server side, both on and off?
What do you mean?
Well, it's just my team recently, unrelated to really Crossplane stuff, we ran into issues where we found out the validation behaviors is quite different depending on whether you're using server side or not,
Yeah.
server side or not. It was a kind of a shock to us.
Yeah, actually, I noticed the same thing. I don't really know the exact reasons. So this is without the server side.
Yeah, I can maybe I'll post somewhere. I'll post to Slack to you. I put together a gist. At least it was such a pain for us. I actually went through and documented the code flow through the API server to understand the difference in the behavior. So
awesome. Yeah.
I'll share that gist with you. Yeah, and you can hopefully it can do some good for you.
Yeah,
thank you very much.
Your pain may be our benefit there, Dan. So that would definitely be useful to have that context for sure. Thanks for bringing that up, man. Cool. All right. So then let's close Zoom windows again and move things out of the way again. Let's see if Hassan for 3742. Is there any traction there that you're able to get now? Like, have you synced up with Dan? Is there next steps identified? I don't remember what the latest on that is, but I really do like the getting this invested in.
Yeah. Currently it's mostly waiting for me to get back to that and convert that draft PR into a like ready for review one. Previously I was waiting for Dan, but I think after he's being emeritus maintainer right now, I will try to find a replacement to get some reviews on that PR. But the state is currently I need to get back to that and spend some time on it.
Got it. Cool. So you're not explicitly blocked. It's you just need to get back to it. Totally understand. Got it. Cool. And then I think that there's a few other things I would call out here as, hey, these are potentially issues of concern that we would want to invest in 1.14, but they don't really have an owner yet. So, I'm just gonna call those out without an action plan right now, which is okay. We can figure out an action plan. But 4378 of Crossplane 1.12.2 results in huge memory. That one still was kind of concerning for me. I haven't heard wide and frequent reports of lots of people seeing that, but I did hear a couple at least. So that one that's on the back of my mind for me. So getting some attention on that in 1.14 is kind of important. This one here, 3993. For the append slice overwriting instead of appending. I think Aaron Eaton weighed in on that and said that he saw some of that behavior as well too. So there's something still lurking there that sounds like we would want to investigate into that. And then I think that was the bug functionality, the like defects in functionality that I was concerned. Yeah, so it's just those two, I think. I have those marked as P1s, so we can. I think when we're doing any sort of work planning, we could take those into account for prioritizing those and getting some owners on those. Cool. Anything else that folks want to bring up for the context of 1.14? Right. Then let's go ahead and keep moving on. And 1.14 is scheduled for late October, like the last week of October. And definitely I would like to get that out before KubeCon in Chicago. So we have that as a nice accomplishment and momentum going into KubeCon there. All right, let's talk about provider releases. So there is a set of provider releases for Upbound's official providers there. Jean, maybe I think you ran those releases, perhaps. Is there anything you wanted to call specifically about those?
Yeah, so mostly it contains an important bug fix for the granular management policies feature. And we also introduced a fix in the reconciliation logic of the update runtime. And then lastly, we've bumped the Terraform CLI version to 1.5.5, which is the last version released before the BSL license was introduced, primarily to address a bunch of CVEs that we discovered with security scanning.
Oh, nice. So schedule, like doing a security scan, a trivia scan there on a regular schedule, that was recently added as well. Is that right, John?
That's correct.
Very cool. So that's really cool to see. All right.
All right, and then on provider Terraform, there's a new feature around nested objects in the output that was added by a community member.
Awesome. That's great. All right. And if anybody has other recent releases of providers that they would like to share, feel free to either add that into the agenda doc here directly or put it in the chat, and we'll make sure that that gets added to that list as well. And also a reminder that anytime anybody has a new release of a provider, they're more than welcome to share it in the announcements channel on the Crossplane Slack workspace too. Happy to share all that stuff. All right, so that's everything then for the 1.14 milestone for providers, etc. So let's move on into the community topics section as well. As we typically do, we have a section with various content from around the ecosystem and everything that's going on with Crossplane. So a couple cool articles here that are written by folks in the community to kind of explain their use cases and what they're learning with Crossplane. And then I know a lot of folks have already seen this, but it's worth calling out as well, is that we made a blog post here about what HashiCorp's BSL license change has the impact it may have for the Crossplane project. So you could read the details about it in that blog post. And the TLDR of it is that we're not considering ourselves impacted directly right now for a couple of reasons. One is that we are not updating our usage of Terraform CLI to a version that has the BSL license. That's one thing. And then long term, we do want to remove usage of Terraform in the long run and have a more native cloud provider mechanisms and code generation, et cetera, for generating providers. So that's kind of the too long didn't read on that one. All right. So the Community Day event is the schedule and lineup has been announced for that. So you can see that in this blog post here. Let me also say September 19th. So folks that are interested in attending this event, there's the registration link can be found here. It can also be found in this blog post. But one thing I did want to call out is that just another round of gratitude for everybody who submitted talks to the Community Day event. We had some quite good content that was submitted there, and we only had 3 slots for talks from the community, since it's only a 2-hour event. It's not an all-day event. So there's a whole bunch of good ideas that got submitted. There wasn't a single one that I didn't like, actually, so it made it quite hard to whittle it down to a smaller set there. But so folks that did not get selected this time, there's certainly more opportunities in the future. And then also, for other community days that we want to run, but also opportunities to maybe take your content and do it as a blog post on the Crossplane blog instead. So we'll be in touch with folks that submitted proposals to explore other options for the sharing the content, because everything was really quite good. But then congratulations as well then to Marco, to Christina, and Tobias for those talks being selected. And I'm quite excited about this day. It's less than a month away, so we're coming up on it pretty quick, and really hoping to see a lot of people there. And it's going to be a really fun day, I think. So check out this blog post if you want to go ahead and register it and attend that day on September 19th. All right, Nick, I did hear you talk earlier today, so I think you were able to make it this morning. Do you want to go ahead and introduce your topic here about code owners?
Yes. I'm not looking at the document. I don't remember what it is. This is mostly a discussion that's relevant to the maintainers. We have a code owners file in the Crossplane repo, and there's a couple of different groups in there. In the code owners file, we intend to do roughly two things. GitHub uses it to assign pull requests to people, to ask them to review it, and also controls who can merge a pull request. I added this because I noticed yesterday that I'm repeatedly using, I have super user powers on the repo, and I'm repeatedly using that to merge pull requests that are approved by a maintainer but aren't approved by the specific set of people the code owners wants it to be approved by. So one of the ways this is not working is we've got the group Crossplane reviewers, who are kind of sort of people who might become maintainers one day, though they are added as code owners for basically every directory, and we add them because we want them to be added as reviewers, not because we want them to be like blocking the ability to merge something. So something that keeps happening is that this works in that it picks two people from the Crossplane reviewers team, I think it's two, and adds them to a pull request to ask them to review it. It doesn't work in that even if the subject matter expert or a maintainer approves a PR, the PR still can't be merged because it's waiting for someone from the reviewers group to approve it. So I'm not sure if we could tweak that. I think more broadly, I'm skeptical how well the reviewers group is actually working, in that I'm not sure how often someone gets added to a PR from the reviewers group and then feels a sense of ownership, but actually sort of does the first pass review there. So I don't have a solution in mind at the moment, just calling out that I don't think the code owners file is working particularly well at the moment, so it might be nice to figure it out at some other point. But this does kind of feel like a topic for we don't actually have a forum where the maintainers of Crossplane meet, but if we did, that would probably be a better topic for this rather than this community meeting.
Did folks want to have some observations or some experiences with this that they wanted to share?
I can just say for the division I'm in, we are using, in addition to code owners, some apps, registered apps, to do some of the more fine grain stuff that Nick is alluding to. I can't say that it's the best solution. I can say it's more or less working. So maybe GitHub Actions would be better, possibly. But we're not, I can say we're not using them. We're using registered apps to do these other fine grain kind of things.
Dan, are those internal apps for in your organization, or are they like publicly available ones?
It's a mixed bag, to be honest, and the level of let's say the number of checks that are being performed is quite numerous. So I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, just with regards to sort of like the access control that's being discussed here, are the apps involved in that public domain or not? I don't know. I can check and post somewhere. Maybe I'll just post to Nick what I find. Yeah, again, hopefully it's something useful.
Yeah, definitely. That might be two things that are useful then that you can share with us, Dan. Nick, I just made an adjustment, by the way, in the Zoom settings for automatically adjusting the input level of my microphone. So hopefully that is better now.
I think so, yeah. I was having to like turn it up all the way to hear you, and then when someone spoke, it would be like super loud.
Oh, geez, that's not a professional way to run this meeting. Come on, Jared, get it together. All right. So then, yeah, then I kind of want to just acknowledge something as well, Nick, that you're saying there is that, first, it is kind of annoying or impractical, where if a maintainer has approved it, but it still can't be merged because it needs somebody from the reviewers group. That's just kind of a bit of an impracticality that should be adjusted or looked at. But the greater scenario here of like, what does the reviewers group mean? What are the expectations for it? Does, like maybe there's like a cultural thing here as well? Because, I'll be the first to admit myself and take some accountability that if I get, as part of the reviewers group, if I get assigned a PR, I don't always go and look at it and I don't follow through with it. So I don't take that as an ownership of it and stewarding the PR. So there could be some cultural things to adjust as well of, okay, if you're having a PR assigned to you, then it is the expectation that you're supposed to follow up on it in a certain amount of time or something like that. Because it's kind of just like, yeah, people get assigned to it, but then what is the follow-up exactly? What are the expectations is not super clear. And that's kind of something that's not working well. Any other comments on that topic that folks want to share? Like Philippe, Hassan, Ezgi, Lovro.
I can. Go ahead, Philippe.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I agree. Sometimes we had some hiccups, but it's also sometimes depending on who's the author, it's okay if there is just if an author is from the reviewers group and there is an approval from a maintainer, it's fine. But if it's the reverse, it's not. So there are a few inconsistencies, if I recall correctly. Maybe it's the other way around. I can't remember, but there are a few inconsistencies with the way we handle the number of reviews required. So totally agree to review that.
Yeah,
Lovro.
from my side also, like it makes sense to go over this again. Like I understand, like if a maintainer approves a PR, especially if it's not something long or very complicated, it makes sense that they would have the possibility to just merge without waiting for Crossplane reviewers. And I don't know if this is possible technically through GitHub, but yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think my ideal situation is on every pull request that gets opened, at least one reviewer is assigned to it, feels a sense of ownership, and actually, gets around to doing a first review pass, let's say within 24 hours or 48 hours. Does not actually need to approve it for it to be merged, as in their approval does not block it being merged. We also have set up subject matter experts. So for instance, Hassan gets copied on anything that affects the package manager code, as somewhat of the idea there being that Hassan would be maybe like final approve, sign off on that. But what you also see is sometimes, I'll be collaborating closely with Philip or something like that, and he'll open a PR, and I just want to merge it and move on quickly without sort of too much process there. So I want to balance keeping subject matter experts in the loop, giving reviewers a chance to review things, not requiring maintainers, and especially a subset of kind of motivated maintainers, to be the people actually kind of reviewing and moving all the PRs along, especially when they're sort of little drive-by PRs that aren't blocking our day-to-day work, that are easy for them to sort of sit there. So there's a lot of stuff to sort of balance here, basically. That's kind of hard to get right. I will say I don't have a strong feeling that automatic assignment of pull requests has really worked very well for us as a way to get people to review them and pay attention to them. So, yeah.
Yep, that all makes sense. We can do some more thinking about it. So I think the problems have been, the challenges we have with it have been well identified now.
Yeah, I will say, just as a side note, like, I really don't feel like there's a good meeting to talk about this. Like, I feel like I want to skip over this because I don't feel like it's relevant to like more than 50% of the people on this call, but I don't know what other meeting I would talk about this in. So just as a heads up.
Yep, that's a good point as well, Nick. All right, Hassan, let's go ahead and hand over to you so you can walk us through the work you've been doing for deletion ordering recently. So I'll stop sharing my screen, Hassan, if you want to drive and show off everything on your screen.
Yep. Okay, so basically the idea idea is, you know, there is an infamous problem with like if there are multiple managed resources, when there is a dependency between each of them, when the composite resource is deleted, we may end up with some orphaned MR or managed resources. A typical example of this is like, imagine a composition which composes a Kubernetes cluster and composes a provider config for provider Kubernetes or provider Helm, and then a release or a Kubernetes object which uses this cluster. So what we see in this case is like when we create the composite resource, all of them created successfully, we get a like up and running claim and composite. But when we delete them, we usually end up with some orphaned release or object resources because the cluster where they were installed is deleted, or like secrets disappeared before the release successfully uninstalled. So we had a design for this, and like primarily the design is proposing a new API, a generic usage resource, which would allow defining usage relationship between composed resources, basically, which could be either managed resources or composite resources. And when this usage relationship is defined, we will check the deletion of those resources that is in use with the help of a admission webhook. So if there are, for example, if there is a delete request like sent for this cluster in this case, and there is this usage resource defined, the deletion webhook will prevent the deletion of this cluster resource until this usage disappears. So this is the like high level idea. In the design there are like some alternatives discussed and some comparison in terms of like basically we discussed two different approaches. One is the one that we choose, which is a webhook based, which is rejecting delete request when the resource is in use. And the other one was the like whether we should delay the resource without any rejection or not. Like for anyone interested, like they can check like the comparison chart here and why we ended up with this webhook based solution, which is also in line with the Kubernetes Lean's proposal, which proposes a similar, like it is still a cap, not merged yet, that it's still open, but it also like it's also going in a similar direction where a resource that is in use will be rejected with a admission webhook with a conflict error. So this is like the high level overview of the design, and there is this implementation PR open and waiting for reviews. I think it is for 3 weeks now. It is waiting for reviews. And we have the documentation PR as well, and I will just show how it looks like from its preview. So we have this new usages section in the documentation, and it will be an alpha feature which could be enabled by enable usages flag, just like any other alpha features we have. And then like we have a section for how a usage can be created. So the one that is primarily targeted by the design is like the usage for deletion ordering case. But a nice side effect is like we can also define usages today with the implementation for deletion protection. For example, if you have a like critical production database, then you can just define a usage of database instance, and you can provide a reason like why this resource should not be deleted. And once you define this usage, any deletion request will be rejected to this database manage resource. The other
Hassan,
yeah.
So that's saying then that it is not required to have the by field set. Is that correct? Like it can be totally empty?
Yeah, that's true. Like basically the reason and by fields are mutually exclusive. Like you would need to define one of them, otherwise it will reject the creation. But yes, that's true. By is optional, and yeah, you can
Got it. And then if the day came where you would actually truly want to delete this resource, then you delete this usage object first, and then you can go ahead and delete the resource that of is pointing to.
Yeah, that's
Cool.
true.
Makes sense.
And for the deletion ordering case, like as I said, the typical example is like a release resource using a cluster resource. In this case, we will define a usage of cluster by release, and we need to like define like resource references. The other important feature is like it's always not possible to give the names of the resources, especially when they are created as part of a composition. In this case, you can define or like you can define resource selectors, and the usage controller will resolve those selectors similar to how our cross resource references work today. So the last section talks about how a usage can be used in a composition, and it shows a simple example of like a composition which composes a cluster, a release, and then a usage resource which is for release using cluster. So as you can see, we can use match controller ref instead of directly giving the name of the releases or cluster resources, and the usage controller will resolve the correct cluster or release. If there are multiple releases, for example, then we can combine this match controller ref with match labels and give some unique labels for different releases and define multiple usages in this case. Yeah, so that's pretty much the overview of the documentation, which is still an open PR. And now I will continue with a quick demo. So basically in the PR, there is this like command for running a pre-built or custom image which has the support for the feature and has this like enable usages flag passed. And for demo, I will use the manifest that I have implemented for end-to-end testing in the PR. So basically there are currently I'm in the usage directory, and there are tests for like usage used in composition and standalone, and in standalone case we have two different sections for with by and with reason. So I will show the standalone part, which is relatively easy to follow. So with reason, there is a usage and there is a used resource, and let me show what those have. The used resource is a NOP resource, which is a resource of provider NOP, which does nothing, just for testing purposes. And there is this usage which prevents the deletion of that NOP resource. So I will create all of them. And you see that like kubectl get usage usage becomes true, and in the details you see the reason that we provided in the API. And now if I want to delete the used resource, I am getting an error from the admission webhook, which says that this resource in use by one usages, it could be in use by multiple. We give one of them, name of the one of them for like debugging purposes. And then the reason is printed like this resource is protected. If I delete the usage, the protection is removed and I can successfully delete the managed resource, or it could be a composite as well. The second example is with reason. And here I have a using resource, a used resource, and then a usage, which defines this relationship. And if I create that, no, it is with reason, sorry. Okay, now I created, and this time details shows a formatted string, which says like which resource uses which resource, like instead of the reason in the previous case. And now if I want to delete the used resource, I will get a similar error, but this time it says the usage, this resource is in use by one usages, and prints the name of the usage and which resource is using that. And now if I delete the using resource, this time I will be doing something different. Instead of deleting the usage, I am deleting the using resource. And once the using resource is deleted, usage immediately disappears. Because in this case, there is no meaning for having a usage for a non-existing resource. And now I can delete the used resource. So this is basically like a quick demo of how usage can be used in a standalone way. But the more important one is having it used in a composition.
Hassan, before you move
yeah.
on to the more complicated one,
Yeah.
quick question I had for you on the example you just showed. So you mentioned, or you demonstrated, that the usage object automatically is, garbage collected or deleted or removed in some way when the using object is gone and deleted. So does that imply that if you create, before you've created the used and using objects, if you create a usage that's pointing to, things that don't exist yet, will Crossplane just automatically delete it, clean up that usage object because it's not pointing to things that exist yet? Do you have to create the usage object last?
No, not really. Like once, like we are using owner references for this, and if you delete the usage first, then it couldn't establish the usage relationship, and it couldn't establish the ownership relationship. It will just wait and error out, stating that the usage relationship couldn't be defined because that resource does not exist. Once the usage relationship is established, which is also doing the owner reference part, then that like deletion of using resource will trigger the deletion of usage.
Okay. And then is that what ready true means here for usage objects? Is that like, yes, my by and my of or whatever, those I found them, this is valid, like everything is tracked, like that's ready true here?
Yeah, that's exactly that.
Okay, I think I get it now. Okay, thank you.
Hassan, if I can have a quick question. Do we have a way of back propagating to MRs, to standalone MRs, whether they have usages? So I'm thinking of a scenario where I have a file with 5 MRs without a composition, and I want to find from the MRs whether they have usages that are blocking them.
Yeah, if there are direct usages, I think you can definitely prepare some like commands or like if you are using API, some code to check that. But if like the relationship is defined by a composition, a composite, like is usage is defined to a composite which composes those MRs, then I think this shouldn't be that straightforward. So yeah, I'm not sure like if I get the use case exactly, but this is how it will like.
Yeah, so with compositions, you're right. That would be easier. But I'm thinking, I have just MRs. I deployed some MRs without composition, and then I wanna, find from the MR whether certain MR is, protected by a existing usage. So I was thinking maybe, we have some owner references or annotations on the MR itself that would help me identify the usage if it exists.
Yeah, like currently we like to we need to prevent or interrupt the delete requests, and we use a admission webhook for this. And we are not preventing all delete requests on all resources. We use a specific label, which is crossplane io dot like / in use true. So you can check that label and see if that resource could be in use or not.
I gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so now let's continue with the composition example. So in this case, this one, I have this composition, and this time I like labeled basically this composition composes two resources. I'm still using the node resource, but labeling the resource as cluster or release to be able to, mimic the behavior or better represent the behavior. And like this is representing the cluster resource, this is representing the release resource. And then there is this usage which is defined on release using cluster. So there is one thing here that worth mentioning. Like since the problem is the release, like deletion of release is taking time and cluster is disappearing in the meantime, I have like mimicked that behavior using a finalizer, which is like a custom one I just added, which is delaying the deletion of using resource, or you can read it as deletion of release. So let me quickly show how it looks like in action. Create setup and claim. And when I created the claim, you see the two resources are composed this time. And this one is representing the release, and this one is representing the cluster. And then there is this resource, which is, this one is release. So release using cluster. So now I will delete the claim. Without the usages, what happens is like immediately after we delete the claim, the resources disappears, and since the release is not being uninstalled, it hangs and like orphaned. So now when I deleted this, everything stays here still, and behind the scenes, the garbage collector is getting errors because it cannot delete the cluster resource. And release resource is not being garbage collected because it has a finalizer still. So now I will, imagine that release is successfully uninstalled and provider Helm is removing that finalizer from the release resource. Release resource disappeared now, and usage disappeared as well. And after a short while, which is like back off period of the garbage collector, the cluster resource disappeared as well. So this is, at a high level how it looks like. I was thinking to make this demo using an actual release and actual cluster, but the problem is like it takes too much time to get the cluster, and it's not that easy to follow in this case. So this is how I wanted to represent the same behavior here.
Amazing, Hassan. This is really cool to see this and kind of see like the tangible practical examples of it, and kind of show how this feature comes together. And I really like also in your PR the how to test, providing like a test image and these example manifests and end-to-end testing and stuff like that. So it looks like this is fairly comprehensive, and really quite cool to see, man. Very good work, dude.
Thank you.
Any questions from the group? We got a lot of questions as we were going along, but any final questions here for Hassan's work?
Not a question per se, but maybe just put something on the radar. So my team definitely struggles with deletion order, but we're dealing with something. Someone's helping us in creating this situation for us, and that is that we use SAP's Gardener for provisioning all clusters, including transient ones that are used for integration testing. And what our problem is that when Gardener is deleting a cluster, it goes in and it says, okay, well, all resources in the API server, custom resources are not what I'm going to go through and try to nuke those, but the order is randomish. And this is obviously a big pain because then you have like, webhooks and controllers that are needed for proper cleanup getting nuked before they have a chance to process the other resources that you need. So for example, Crossplane gets deleted, the Crossplane deployment gets deleted, but then you have MR is still out there. So we've had to put in stuff to try to make sure that we have an orderly delete of everything first. Now, what's proposed here will absolutely help us in whatever things we've hooked in, my team's hooked in to make sure that orderly delete's happening. This is absolutely going to help us, but that we're still going to have to do something and not let Gardener get its hooks on it and start just deleting things again, kind of in a random order. So I don't know how widespread this scenario is, where someone's running something that's just, hey, here's a cluster, I'm planning on getting rid of the cluster, I'm kind of blindly going through and just nuking everything that I see in the API server and then nuking the cluster. I don't know how widespread that is, but it's definitely something we see within the context of SAP. And I don't want to say that anyone, because that's just a mess. So I don't want to say that, like, hey, Hassan's thing should be, consider that as something that it needs to be really addressed. But maybe, just a pointer to folks like, hey, this is a case we're explicitly not covering it, because this relies on webhooks, etc. And that's totally fine. But we're not handling this case, so don't even think that it does.
I mean, I think this case is specific to cross-plane composite deployed resources, right? So if there's something else out there other than cross-plane that's going to be creating or deleting things, the usage objects might get in the way and prevent the deletion of the things until the other things are done. But yeah, I mean, other things, other outside forces would not be considered.
Yeah. The only way you could potentially, if you were doing something with just owner refs, but you'd have to like tie in the services and deployments as well, which then it just becomes untenable, right? You can't build that object graph reasonably. So you have to do what's done here.
I mean, I don't know anything about Gardner, so I'm totally ignorant, but the Crossplane is kind of approaching it from the claim perspective, right? So you have a single claim, single composite, and that generates the tree for you. And if you delete the claim, delete the top composite, with the help of the usage object, the deletion process will proceed in an orderly fashion. Might take a little while, but it will be an orderly fashion and will delete, all the things. So and again, I know nothing about Gardner, so I can't speak to how they differ.
Oh, hey, so maybe a quick question to you, Hassan. So if I'm creating usage objects, the targets, can they be arbitrary, like the types? Am I limited to pointing to manage resources, or can I really point to anything that's in the cluster?
Yeah, currently, like, it is designed and implemented to support managed resources and composite resources, which are basically composed resources. So I don't know, like, if you like, there is definitely no namespace. So namespace resources won't be supported. I already know that, but for cluster scoped resources, I think it may work. But while we were talking about, like, if Gardener clusters has some like custom resources to be created, for example, you create a CR and you get your Gardener cluster, which I kind of remember from my SAP days, by the way. In this case, it could be wrapped with a provider Kubernetes object, and a usage relationship it could be defined on top of the provider Kubernetes object. So like to be able to use the usages feature for those type of situations, I think we would need to get things under Crossplane's control, and this could be done with provider Kubernetes in this case.
Cool. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing that use case, Dan. So we are exactly right at time here. So we'll go ahead and wrap it up for the day. There were no other items on the agenda. But yeah, great to see everybody today. Thanks for all the good discussion, and thanks, Hassan, for showing off this cool feature work too.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, bye.